Good evening. Attorney, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this evening's address by Barbara Mills, KC, the Chair of the Bar for 2025. Before I hand over, I just want to say that Barbara has been struggling with laryngitis and has a bit of a weak voice, but she's determined to put the show on. So, Barbara Mills, KC.
Good evening, Master Treasurer, distinguished guests, family, friends, colleagues. A very warm welcome to Inner Temple Hall. At 6 o'clock this morning, poor old Piran, the chair's advisor, got the text no chair's advisor wants to get, which is that the chair had lost her voice. But you know, I've waited too long, you've waited too long, we've waited too long. So the show will go on. The baton has been handed over by Sam Townend. Sam, thank you for all your hard work last year and showing me what it looks like to go that extra mile for the profession. You will be missed, and we owe you a debt of gratitude. I am delighted and deeply humbled to be given the opportunity to lead our profession in 2025. I will do so flanked by Kirsty Brimlow, KC, and Lucinda Orr. This is the first time in Bar Council's history, 131 years, that its 3 office holders are women. About time too, frankly. It's a really proud moment, so I hope you will celebrate that too tonight. This evening is my opportunity to tell you who I am, what made me put my hand up to chair, and outline mine and the Bar Council's priorities for 2025. My story began here in this very hall, Tuesday the 16th of October 1990, when at 23 I was called to the bar. With me were 2 of the most resilient women I have ever known. My very proud Ghanaian mother, Rosa, and my sister Linda. Sadly, my mum is no longer with us, but if she was here, she would have that broad grin on her face, and she'd be saying to the people next to her, "Oh yes, she's one of mine." And I would be obviously very embarrassed. I am delighted that my sister has traveled from her home in the United States to be with me tonight. By the time I was called, I had secured pupillage at 4 paper buildings, then a common law set, but I was assigned to 2 family practitioners, Anna Porfley, who specialised in children work, and Jonathan Cohen, who was particularly known for financial remedy work. Both of them were to become High Court judges. I can tell you I learnt my craft from the very best. To begin with, I did all aspects of family work. Then I specialised in the law involving children. I didn't stop there. By the early 2000s, more research was emerging as to the damage to families who used litigation to resolve their disputes, and I jumped at the chance to qualify as a mediator. That decision baffled my senior clerk, Michael, who was here this evening. He couldn't understand why I thought a set of chambers would encourage people to stay out of court. But I convinced him that that would change, and indeed it has. Mediation and non-court dispute resolution is now at the very heart of the way in which we do things in the family courts. The development of my mediation practice was the stepping stone into further forms of dispute resolution, as well as into the judiciary. I became a recorder in 2011, an arbitrator in 2016, and in 2023, a deputy High Court judge. Along the way, I took silk in 2020. 3 things have made a difference in my career to date. First of all, very early on, I learnt the importance of planning a career. During my pupillage, I spent several months in Canada as a Pegasus scholar, and there I met young lawyers who were forward-thinking and very clear as to a plan that they wanted to adopt for their futures. To have that sense of direction was a revelation to me, and one that I embraced and kept throughout, to have a plan and to aim high. Secondly, I learnt along the way that my well-being was not something that to be turned to occasionally when things were falling apart. I needed to touch base with myself regularly to see how things were going for me as well as for my practice. Finally, I owe a debt to those allies and champions from across the sector, senior judges, senior barristers, solicitors, as well as my clerks, who provided me with work, ensured that I was paid fairly, and who led me and mentored me. They shone a light on me to see what I could be. My involvement with the Bar Council started in the mid-1990s when I was a member of the Professional Conduct and Complaints Committee. After a break, when my daughter came along, I stopped working in the Bar Council, but I returned to it in 2018. Then as the Family Law Bar Association's representative, and soon took a seat in the Equality, Diversity and Social Mobility Committee. Between 2020 and 2023, I was the co-chair of the Race Working Group, and in 2021, delivered the first race report. In 2022, I decided to stand as your chair, involve myself in the election in 2023, and well, you know the rest. But why did I stand? In part to show what is now possible in our profession, and to pass on what has helped me and so many others to succeed. On paper, in 1990, I didn't fit the stereotype. I wasn't a man, I wasn't white, I didn't go to Oxbridge, I read law at Hull University, I didn't have parents with resources, and I had no connections in the profession. But I backed myself. I was resilient and adaptable and was prepared to work hard and seize opportunities when they came along. Martin Luther King Jr. vowed the critical importance of deep belief in your own dignity, your worth, and your somebodyness. And I felt I was somebody. I wanted to make something of myself, and always driven to show that if I did, I would demonstrate what is possible. Enough of me. What lies ahead for the Bar Council in 2025? It seems to me that every chair's year is made up of 3 parts. One is the things we inherit, the other, the things we make our priorities, and the third, the curveballs, the things we can't predict, and that will be bound to shape our tenure. Well, I've had my first curveball, standing in front of you without a voice. So first, the inheritance. What have I inherited? Many of the issues facing the bar remain the same year after year, and I'm the latest line of the chairs inheriting a justice system in need of much repair. There are record backlogs in our courts, delays across the system, with people having to wait years for their day in court. Legal aid is unavailable to an increasing number of people when they need it the most. In short, a justice system at breaking point after over a decade of neglect and insufficient resources. We will keep pushing that button. I know that the publicly funded bar is disillusioned and exhausted. They are working harder than ever, doing work that is demanding and often unpaid. Barristers working in criminal, family, immigration, and housing cases are often working, as I say, for no money and having cases bounced out of the list at the last moment. Just before Christmas, the Ministry of Justice announced a welcome and long overdue increase in criminal legal aid. That was for the solicitors. We welcome that. But what about my colleagues at the criminal bar? We urgently need to see a change, not only in remuneration, but also in relation to workload and predictability. We need to have parity between the prosecution and defence when it comes to their fees. Otherwise, we will continue to have that drain in talent from the profession, which we cannot stand by and observe. We will push that too. The spending review is expected in June. In our submission to that spending review, we set out our priorities for restoring the justice system and putting it on a sustainable footing. That is in line with the government's own plan to fix the foundations and its mission to kickstart the economy and modernise public services. We will push that too. Last year, we called for a royal commission on the criminal justice system because we recognised the need for cross-party political support on something as important as our criminal justice system. We didn't get that, but we have been closely engaged with the Gork review on sentencing, and we will also do the same for the Leveson review on criminal justice. We will be highlighting the bar's position and perspective in relation to both of those. I really am very sorry about my voice, but with yours, I will persevere. There is more to do beyond the publicly funded areas of practice. Something that we don't say anything like enough of is a huge contribution the legal services makes to the British economy. In 2022, 34 billion is what we contributed. And the bar, of course, plays a key role within the sector. And that is particularly the commercial and chancery bars. The UK accounts for around 10% of the global market of legal services, second only to the United States. Our bar is often the first choice for citizens and businesses across the world on an ever-growing range of issues. The quality of our legal services, coupled with the preeminent reputation of the law of England and Wales, the independence of our judiciary, and the rule of law, what makes our jurisdiction so attractive. But we cannot take it for granted, because hot on our heels, competing with us, are international dispute resolution centres across the world. And so in 2025, I will continue to promote our jurisdiction as a jurisdiction of choice for international disputes. Let me turn, while I still have some voice, to my own priorities. I wish to make progress in 3 broad areas. Firstly, I want to raise the profile of family law and to help the government in its mission to halve violence against women and girls. Secondly, I want to pass on the benefits of respecting our well-being enough to make it a core skill within our effective practices. And finally, I want to ensure that we continue to make strides in our pursuit of equality, diversity, and inclusion. So why is family justice a priority? Well, first of all, I'm glad to be the first family practitioner since 1988. And while I have the mic, it provides me with the perfect opportunity to focus on the central importance of an effective family court in a civilized society. The family court hears cases dealing with all aspects of human existence. We attempt to bring order to chaotic lives. We protect the vulnerable. We ensure that people can live with means. Much of what we hear is distressing and difficult. I would describe the family courts as the courts of life. It is arguably one of the areas with the widest variety of cases. Our work spans from the very beginning of life, families who use assisted reproduction and surrogacies to become units, to the end of life, when judges are being asked about the withdrawal of medical treatment. If the assisted dying bill comes into law, it is likely to the family division where cases will be brought if they require court intervention. So we deal with the beginning of life and the end of life and everything in between. The welfare of children, the protection of the vulnerable, the protection of the incapacitated. It seems to me it is about time to raise families' voice. It needs attention. So to be clear, we'll make the case for investment as well as the case that you put money into the system and you save it. Over the last decade, we have seen real per person cuts of about 22% in our justice system. At the same time, case volumes and backlogs have increased. What remains following a huge number of closures is a court infrastructure that has become dog-eared and moth-eaten and unfit for purpose. The lack of access to legal advice has swollen to the point at which, at times, neither party is represented in as many as 40% of the cases that come into the family court. That means 4 out of every 10 people have not had any advice, have no idea what rights they have, and don't even know whether the court is the right forum for their dispute. This results in dysfunction in our justice system, costs, delay, injustice, fear, uncertainty, lives put on hold, and all of these are the bitter fruits of underinvestment. Despite those cuts, barristers have continued to step up and plug the gaps whenever possible. Pro bono work exemplifies the very best of us. The cost of living crisis has driven demand for access to both advocate and the free representation unit. And whilst we applaud them, they are not the solution. We cannot rely on their goodwill. I am hopeful that even in these cash-strapped times, ministers are beginning to get the message, and the early signs from this relatively new government are promising and encouraging. Certainly, funding has been put on the table for criminal legal aid, and we're expecting a consultation in relation to housing and immigration, and we wait with bated breath as to what they say about family. Apart from the need to make the case for investment into the family justice, I will also take the opportunity to showcase how some of the innovations created in our system may well be transferred to other sectors. When a family is in crisis, the family justice system is interested in what has gone wrong, sure, but only as a baseline to help us to understand and predict the future, to formulate sustainable solutions. The family approach could inform new thinking in other courts. Take, for example, the Family Drug and Alcohol Court, which was launched in January 2008 as an alternative court for proceedings where parental drug misuse is the reason to worry about the safety of children. Evaluations since then have shown positive outcomes for that court. Children with a primary carer in the FDAC care proceedings are more likely to be reunited with that primary carer at the end of proceedings than in others. A higher proportion of those parents also get off drug and alcohol. That is a success story that, for example, may well come in handy into the innovative and creative solutions that are being looked at in the criminal jurisdiction. Meanwhile, the government has said it wants to halve violence against women and girls. An effective and properly funded family court system should be front and centre of that, if that target is to be hit. And it's plain when you look at some of the figures. In the latest femicide census, which is 2021, the 147 women who were killed by men, 78 of them were killed by a current or former partner. And over half of those women were ready or taking steps to leave the relationships. And at least 40% of all the work that comes into family courts, it has allegations of domestic abuse. To be successful in tackling violence against women and girls, I urge the government to provide a clear definition of that, and one that encompasses all forms of violence and harmful practices specifically aimed at women and girls. I will also urge the government to recognise that VAWG is preventable so that the policies extend beyond reactive measures and incorporate prevention and early intervention strategies. I will also call, because the family courts being ideally placed to tackle violence against women and girls, to ensure that there is access to early legal advice, representation by both parties who come before the family court, and a range of package and measures to enhance the experiences of those who have to use the family court. In summary, I will be saying to the government, you need to fund the family courts and end the horrific role of violence against women and girls. When it comes to the range of challenging areas that you face, family lawyers are well used to that. And it might be why you think I make the second priority well-being. But in fact, the work that all of us do is intense and highly pressured. When I was called in 1990, if you had openly talked about your mental health, or heaven forbid, menopause, you would have had a derisory snort. And if you said you were stressed, probably invited to have a stiff gin and tonic in Dailies after work. Well, most people will agree that times have changed, and we know that things go on. Things are not going well for most people by the time they sit with a barrister. What we also know now is that professionals who are exposed to trauma and distress themselves experience vicarious trauma. If you add to that the relentless pressure and high expectation, the competitiveness of our work, the adversarial nature of our courts, you begin to see that perfect cocktail and the reason why we need to look after ourselves, she says without a voice. The result of not looking after ourselves, chronic and unmanageable fatigue, burnout and illness, which when left unchecked leads to serious difficulties for our colleagues. Other professions who face similar pressures ensure that there are systems in place to support those members. I would like, therefore, to explore options available for barristers, coaching or supervision, whatever you want to call it, which provides the barrister with an opportunity to have regular, confidential check-ins with the professionals throughout their professional life. Last year, as Vice Chair, I discussed well-being whenever and wherever possible. I don't think I'll ever forget a criminal colleague who I simply asked her in a roping room how she was doing. Fighting back tears, she said not very well. She was overwhelmed. She felt she was letting her children down. She wasn't supporting them. One of them was going through GCSEs. Her daily diet of Rasso work had left her unable to sleep. She didn't know how to go about accessing help and was concerned that she wouldn't be able to afford the help. We have to change that. Or the young civil practitioner who asked me why it was that he couldn't make his therapy, that he was having a tax-deductible expense. We must change that. It seems to me that while we still talk a lot about well-being, it often comes at the point of crisis. And what I will be doing this year, with the help of Charlotte, May Casey, who has very kindly agreed to chair a working group for me, would be looking at the options available to remove the stigma that is attached to seeking help and ensuring that we elevate well-being to a non-negotiable level in the same way as we do having an accountant and having insurance. I will, of course, collaborate with the circuits, the INS, and the specialist bar associations, and I will be coming back to the profession to ask about views. My third and final priority, as I've said, flowing from my concerns about our general well-being, is to continue and pursue the Bar Council's long-term agenda in relation to equality, diversity, and inclusion. What has now become incredibly clear to us is that our well-being is affected by several factors: working conditions, remuneration, but also feeling excluded and experiences of bullying, discrimination, and harassment. The key findings of the Wellbeing Report that we published in January last year tells us that those who report lower overall well-being are women, barristers from an ethnic minority background, younger and junior colleagues, and those with a criminal and family practice. So in 2025, I will focus on 3 A's: awareness, acceptance, and action. Dr. Lingaya, who is the founder and director of Reframing Race, an organization focused on race and racism, said this last year, and some of it bears repeating. He said, the thing about talk is that it carries power. Talk is the place where life-affirming ideas, visions, and dreams are carried, where we find connection with one another, and where we signal who we are and who belongs. He went on to say, when it comes to fostering an inclusive culture, talk is not cheap. So who will I talk to first? Well, first, I will engage with our frontline regulator, the Bar Standards Board. In September last year, the BSB published a consultation in which it announced plans to replace Core Duty 8, Do Not Discriminate, with a more proactive duty to advance and promote equality, diversity, and inclusion. Look, I completely understand why the BSB wants to see faster progress. But I do not believe, as we have said in our comprehensive response, that the new proposals will achieve its intended aim. In short, we are concerned about the intention to use the Code of Conduct designed to set a minimum professional standard which protects people when we represent them as a vehicle to attempt to change our culture. Secondly, we are concerned that the framing of the proposed core duty to impose a duty to deliver a more diverse profession is unlawful and misguided. I am concerned that the proposed regulation may hinder progress in this area, given what we believe to be its ambiguity and potential ineffectiveness of the regulation it proposes. I have been sad to see that the consultation has generated more heat than light, and it is a great reminder of the care with which we must take that any attempt to improve equality, diversity, and inclusion does not create unhelpful division. The road to hell, it is often said, is paved with good intention. Mark Neal, the director of the BSP, was interviewed by Joshua Rosenberg last September. I was very encouraged to hear him say that the consultation really is a consultation and that the BSB is keen to hear from the profession. Nothing appears to be set in stone, and that opens up the opportunity to discuss and move collaboratively with the BSB to develop a practical framework that genuinely delivers diversity and inclusion. I am therefore keen to work with the BSB and to open meaningful dialogue. On this and other issues, it is my intention to foster positive and collaborative relationship with both the BSB as well as the Legal Services Board. The Bar is a broad church, and I, as your chair, will represent members who fundamentally disagree with EDI. So I will continue the conversation with you too. And I hope that we will, in that conversation, persuade those that disagree that it is both reasonable and realistic to expect members of chambers, employees, and bar stakeholders to put practical measures in place to monitor internal practices and to take steps to change inequalities. All individuals who work at the bar should be treated fairly, regardless of their background and their protected characteristics. So here's my invitation to those who disagree with me on equality, diversity, and inclusion. If you are serious and you are ready to bridge the gap between us, if you are prepared to have respectful dialogue backed by the evidence, then my virtual and real doors are open to you. Please, don't sit behind your screens and only put your thoughts on social media. This issue is too important. It's too nuanced. Come and talk to me. Talking alone is not enough. So what actions will I take? Well, I will take actions on bullying and harassment, the young bar, the earning disparity, and say something about the employed bar. One aspect of our workplace culture which is being brought further into light is bullying and harassment. The independent review into bullying and harassment commissioned by Sam, Town and Casey will report in June this year. I am committed to working with Baroness Harman and providing her with the support she needs to finalise her review, and I look forward to working with her and the profession to consider the findings and her recommendations for action. The review provides an important opportunity to reset our culture and improve the working lives of all in our profession and I intend to give it the priority it deserves. Whilst we're awaiting the findings, I would remind everyone working in and around the bar to make use of the support and reporting mechanisms available from Talk to Spot, as well as the wellbeing resources on our websites. When it comes to the young bar, I will focus on the earnings disparities. Earnings in early years can set a trajectory for the entire career. Appointing barristers from underrepresented groups without supporting them to earn as much as their male and white counterparts is discriminatory. Experience shows the advancement in numbers does not ensure better retention, progression, culture change, or equality. A focus on earnings highlights inequality in access to work that affects our opportunity to progress. Specifically, the earning gaps begins at the very start of a woman's career, not because we go off and have children, which is what anecdotally we used to be said. And so it is right for me to start, as I intend to, with the young bar. They are, after all, the lifeblood of the profession. And I start with the young bar for two reasons. During a circuit visit last year, I was talking to a group of young barristers who were unaware of the 0 to 3 year earnings gap report that the Bar Council had produced, and were unaware of the toolkits that would help them manage meaningful practice reviews. That lack of knowledge, which has been something that I've come across time and again, is the reason why I intend to focus with and start with the young bar. What I intend to do is to collaborate with the course providers to incorporate information about practice management and reviews into the new practitioners' programs and continue to raise awareness of what tools and resources are available to the whole bar. When it comes to the employed colleagues, the Bar Working Lives Survey shows that 18% of the 18,000 barristers Bar Council represents work in employed practice. Over half are in public sector and the others in private sector. They have a huge breadth and quality of work, and they are important parts of the economy and the justice system. A potential key driver for their success is the diversity that they enjoy, as well as their culture of flexibility. But career progression has been highlighted to me as a key challenge for our employed colleagues. There is a feeling among some employed barristers, particularly those in the public sector, that their skills and experience are underutilised. So we will be exploring ways in which we can encourage them to use that. The other issue is how seniority is defined for our employed colleagues when KC applications are so heavily focused on advocacy, which is out of some of their reach. I am looking forward to working closely with the Employed Barristers Committee to address those issues. And as to the third part of what faces every chair, the curveballs, as I said, I've already had my first one. I know that I will be well supported by Malcolm Cree and the fantastic team at the Bar Council. I'm also incredibly grateful to the hundreds of barristers who generously give up their time for the good of the profession, with special thanks to the chairs of the various committees, as well as the chairs of the specialist bar associations. I want to thank Lorinda Long for 8 years of her service as Treasurer to the Bar Council, and say goodbye to Amrit Kaur Danua, our outgoing Young Barristers Committee Chair, for her excellent year supporting and promoting the Young Bar. I look forward to working with her successor, Lachlan Stewart, over the coming year. This year, I want to draw more colleagues into the Bar Council. And I'd like the bar to feel, whether you're working in Newcastle or working in Newport, that you're a part of it, that you matter to us at Bar Council. I hope also that when it comes to subscribing to the bar representation fee, you will see its value and in what it does for the Bar Council and support and promote it. I intend to continue to work closely with the circuit leaders, and I look forward to my visit to Wales and Chester Circuit next week. The Bar Council this year will be in Birmingham. I look forward to seeing you there. And finally, my thank yous. Thank you, Baroness Hallett, Mrs. Justice McGovern, Chantel Amy Doris KC, and Amanda Pinto KC for the 4 female previous chairs, for your inspiration and leadership, for providing shoulders for me to stand on and enable me to dream and eventually achieve what once seemed impossible, becoming chair myself. And to my younger self, thank you for ignoring those who said black women who went to Hull University couldn't make it at the bar, for having the audacity to boldly try new things and be prepared to do whatever it took, however uncomfortable she was, to make sure she belonged. As children growing up in Ghana, our elders needed to keep us in check and would often use this old African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I am ready to serve this amazing profession of ours. Walk with me so we can go far together. Thank you.